In his farewell address, President Joe Biden warned that, quote, oligarchy was taking shape, end quote, in America. He specifically name-checked the tech industrial complex and social media as dangers to our democracy. It's a topic we've talked about for years on this show. On Monday, when Donald Trump is sworn in, a handful of tech CEOs and billionaires, each with their own personal history with Donald Trump, not all of it positive, will be in attendance. While it's common for notable figures to attend presidential inaugurations, it will be the first time that the world's three richest men, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos, attend a presidential inauguration. Musk is set to join the administration as co-chair of the new department, that's not really a department, of government efficiency. And both Zuckerberg and Bezos met with Trump after he won the election. In December, Bezos said this about the incoming Trump administration.
He seems to have a lot of energy around reducing regulation. And my point of view, if I can help him do that, I'm going to help him.
This perhaps makes sense for Jeff Bezos, a billionaire capitalist titan of industry. But Bezos also owns a newspaper, The Washington Post. And several high-profile staffers have resigned in the wake of editorial decisions that were friendly to the president-elect. In October, the paper's editorial board was set to endorse Kamala Harris until Bezos killed the article, according to reporters at the Post. Robert Kagan, a longtime editor-at-large, resigned in protest. The billionaire owner of the Los Angeles Times quashed its editorial board's endorsement of Harris as well, a move that was reported initially by Semaphore. On January 4th, a Pulitzer Prize-winning Washington Post cartoonist, Ann Telnaes, resigned from her job at the Post after an editor rejected a cartoon that she drew and had submitted around Christmas. Here's the cartoon. It depicts tech titans, including the Post owner Jeff Bezos, as well as Mickey Mouse, representing Disney, which agreed to pay $15 million to Donald Trump's presidential library in a defamation settlement, all bowing to Trump with bags of money in hand. In an interview with NPR, Telnaes said, quote, "I'm very used to being edited. I've never, ever since I've worked for the Post in 2008, been not allowed to comment on certain topics by having cartoons killed. We have to have the freedom to say what we want to say. We are visual opinion makers," end quote. Telnaes is right. More than journalists even, more than opinion writers, political cartoonists have traditionally had the ability, the responsibility, to some degree, greater freedom to level harsh criticism toward those in power, even if those in power are their employers, and those in power know it. In the 19th century, Gilded Age politician William Boss Tweed of New York once said of the legendary cartoonist Thomas Nast, quote, "Stop the damn pictures. My constituents can't read, but damn it, they can see pictures," end quote. The editorial page editor who rejected Telnaes' cartoon told NPR about their decision, quote, "Not every editorial judgment is a reflection of a malign force. My decision was guided by the fact that we had just published a column on the same topic as the cartoon and had already scheduled another column, this one a satire, for publication. The only bias was against repetition," end quote. The only bias was against repetition. Can you imagine if we took that approach here on this show? I repeat stuff all the time because it's important. You have to know it. You have to know it from different angles. The only bias was against repetition. But this story, it's not that new. It aligns with a larger pattern at the Post and perhaps in journalism at large in America. A great friend of our show, Jennifer Rubin, who had worked at the Post for 14 years, resigned this week. And in her resignation letter, she mentioned her old boss by name. Quote, "Jeff Bezos and his cronies accommodate and enable the most acute threat to American democracy, Donald Trump," end quote. When Trump first entered office in 2017, the Washington Post adopted a new slogan to adorn its front page. I love that slogan, "Democracy dies in darkness." Although it's not abandoning that slogan, it's now experimenting with something new. Quote, "Riveting storytelling for all of America." Joining me now is Maria Ressa. She's a 2021 Nobel Peace Prize winner, president and CEO of Rappler, author of the book, How to Stand Up to a Dictator, The Fight for Our Future. Maria, thanks for being here. Unlike the Washington Post editor, whose excuse was BS, we're going to repeat this. You and I have some version of this conversation about every 2 weeks, because we're going to have to talk about how we as journalists have a responsibility as foot soldiers to democracy without fear or favor of who the threat is. Repetition is not actually our problem. Repetition is what got Donald Trump reelected. Repetition is what put Mussolini in power. Repetition is what put Duterte in power, saying the same thing to the same people all the time until they are convinced that you are right.
Yeah, absolutely, Ali. I mean, if you multiply that on tech, right? Like the thing that is going wrong that set the stage for all of this is the fact that when you say a lie 1,000,000 times, this is on social media, that lie becomes a fact. So no, repetition isn't a problem. In fact, if you're a good speaker, you must repeat to make sure that the points are made. I think this is a very, very difficult time for journalists in America. And we've been here in the Philippines, and there is going to be tremendous a push to give in, to compromise, to duck. And part of that is, you can say it's the business, right? You can survive to lead, to live another day. But of course, the biggest problem here is that if you do, what kind of business will you be? And the business of journalism is extremely different. I think this is something tech has never understood, that the mission of journalism is what drives us. But, let me say the three factors that every news organization is going to have to deal with. And this is part of the reason. Thank you for all the work that you do. The first is the pressure of the business model. Our business model of advertising is dead or dying. Most of the advertising is going to the very platforms where we are constantly attacked, big tech. The second is the breakdown of trust in our own audiences, and that you're seeing that far more clearly in America than in the Philippines. And then the third is this creative destruction, right? In the Philippines, the largest network took the same position that the Washington Post is doing now, obey in advance. And at the end of that time period, during the Duterte years, instead of pushing back, it held back and it lost its franchise to operate the largest television network. So it's like losing a license here in America. When you do this, you give up your power before you're even really tested.
And so Timothy Snyder from Yale makes this point all the time, that the concept of obeying in advance, as distasteful as it is actually more important. You are anticipating what they may do to you, and as a result, you are validating they, meaning the government's ability to do that to you. They don't even sometimes have to do it at that point. They don't need to be audits, which you were subject to. There don't need to be charges that you were subjected to. You're just going to do the thing that you would have done if they got you in trouble in the first place. That's the danger of it. It's insidious, it spreads, and it weakens the industry.
Absolutely. And it makes things progressively worse, right? Like if it's the checks and balances, it's getting rid of checks and balances. And again, the pressure to compromise will always come there. It will come from lawyers. It will come from business folks who will say, don't stick your neck out. I've certainly heard this when we were taking a position that where, we're just going to keep doing our jobs. We're not going to change. If the world is going to change around us, we're going to stay on mission. But there are costs to that. And the company and the owners of the company need to actually accept that cost. And I don't know what America will look like if companies do this, because this, the Nobel Prize, the reason why it was given to journalists is precisely because without journalism, you have no democracy.
Maria, and we're glad we did that because we had nothing to do with it, but we're glad the Nobel Committee did that, because when you are up against that kind of threat, the idea that someone recognizes the value of the work you do does keep us going. So when you got that Nobel Prize, it kind of helped all of us, right? All of us said, hey, someone thinks there's value to standing up to power, because that is what we do. So thank you again for being with us. And unlike the Washington Post editors, you and I are going to repeat some version of this conversation many, many times in the effort to stand up to democracy. Maria Ressa is the president and CEO of Rappler, and she is a 2021 Nobel Peace Prize winner for the important work she's been doing and her important book, How to Stand Up to a Dictator, The Fight for Our Future.